Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Depressed Dior, and this is Kingdom Death Monster 1.5 on Roll20 and Tabletop Simulator. So, changed a little bit of the setup. Expanded the bottom of the record area. It's a little annoying because my recording software does some weird things with the taskbar, like completely hides it for some reason. But at least now I can scroll a little bit more easily. Anyway. So, we now go into the settlement phase for our first lantern year. So I have my board set up essentially like this. The left-hand side is going to that top left corner is the hunt phase stuff. Everything else is essentially the showdown phase as well as the hunters, and then everything on the right-hand side is the settlement stuff. So. First things first, there's various phases, there's steps in the phase that we need to go through. Luckily I have it in a little handout here. So first you set up the settlement, which is automatic in this case. Essentially it's a bunch of cards and little tables and all that nonsense. But with Roll20 I have it all set up already. And most of the Tabletop Simulator modules will have it set up automatically too. Survivor's Return. Heal light, heavy injuries, remove tokens, apply returning survivor effects. Alright. So, one thing to note, we can actually... currently we don't have any survivor effects, but there is one survivor effect we can trigger. It's a one-time thing, but if you name the settlement... the returning survivors will get one survival point. So we're going to go ahead and name this the Sunflower Field. Sunflower Field. And with that, Unzon's going to get one survival. Renazuki's not going to get anything. One, because he's maxed out, and two, he can't gain survival anymore. And then Kamachi will gain one survival. Now, back to this. Heal all injuries and remove tokens. So... we can just reset tokens. That'll take care of it for us. And then we just go... Okay. You don't have to refresh armor. That's dealt with in a different phase. Next is we gain endeavors. So you gain one endeavor for each returning survivor. We have 3 returning survivors this time around. So what I usually do is I set it to the side if I'm not using it. I use these little lanterns to keep track of it. And depending on what sort of stuff you get, you might get more endeavors in the future than just the ones from the survivors. Next is you update the timeline. So over here I have the lantern years, and that's how I keep track of what lantern year I'm on. This is the first lantern year. In this setting, everything's in lantern years, which is kind of a unclear amount of time. Time is kind of weird in this game. I mean, the fact that, new survivors can become hunters pretty much immediately. I mean, it has some... It's a bit quirky in some ways. But going to the timeline, we have the event. And we have 2 events. We have the first day and the returning survivors. So first we need to do the first day, which I think is still the same, but first day. So usually you would set up the settlement event deck, but we're not doing that yet. Instead, you automatically get the first day. First day settlement event will help set up your settlement. It is the first event of any new campaign. The survivors wander, drawn to a blooming light in the distance. They find the serene comfort of a towering pile of lanterns and a small collection of scared people. On a deep instinctual level, they know this area is safe, and they make it their home. Roll 1d10 to determine your starting population and record the result on the back of the settlement record sheet. Choose and record genders for unnamed survivors. You may name an unnamed survivor and create their survivor record sheet at any time during the settlement phase. So in the beginning, you generally could just have a bunch of unnamed survivors and kind of go off of that. And then if you name the survivor, you'll of course get the +1 survival and all that. All right, and then the next thing we do after that is we proceed to the first story. Return to the settlement section of the first story and proceed to the returning survivors story event. This little book means it's a story event. Anytime you hit this, you immediately stop play, and take care of that event. The first day settlement event card will not be used again during the campaign. Do not include it in the settlement event deck. So there you go. Alright, so we need to roll 1d10. It could be anyone that rolls this. So 1d10, 3, so we got the worst result. So 6 unnamed survivors plus a returning survivor. So we start with a population of 9. The best result, of course, is you get 10, and then you have 4. Everyone lives, in which case you have 14. I guess worst case scenario is if you only have 1 returning survivor, and then you roll low, you get 7, which is not that great. Remember, our survivors are pretty much our lifeblood. But we have to build stats, build up their stats, make them stronger. And if we run out of people, we lose. So that is that. Alright, so I have population here. I kind of use this to keep track of things. So right now we have... What if I do this? Stop that. There we go. That looks a bit nicer. Alright. So we got that going for our population. Next, we need to do returning survivors. So returning survivors, I think I have the story event. Yes, I do. Returning survivors. So here's our image. Like I mentioned before, everything is faces. And this is a big pile of lanterns up here that are just emitting a bright light that's kind of lighting up the entire settlement. And everyone feels safe here. Monsters don't seem to come here, and so they're trying to just set things up here and try to live. I believe the returning survivors is the same. So, nominate a survivor to utter the first words. The nominated survivor steps forward and gains +1 courage. They lead the other survivors to learn to speak to one another. They discuss their situation, realizing they must hunt to live. Add the white lion to the quarry list on the settlement record sheet. We don't have a record sheet. This is the layout is our record sheet. Your settlement gains a language innovation. Search the innovation cards for language and place it face up in your play area and record it on your settlement sheet. It's already in our play area. Language is your first innovation, and it will spark the creation of your innovation deck. Build the innovation deck. The innovation deck represents the potential cultural and technological growth of your settlement. It will grow throughout the campaign as you gain new innovation cards. Find the 6 innovation cards with language consequence listed under the title. Ammonia, drums, hovel, inner lantern, paint, and symposium. Shuffle these 6 cards together to form your settlement innovation deck. Place it face down in the designated space on the settlement board. The innovation deck is persistent. Make sure to preserve the unique combination of cards in your deck between play sessions. Finished with their work, the settlement gathers around its glowing center. Glowing center. Armed with language and the nominated survivor aptly names the glowing center of their home the Lantern Horde. The settlement gains the Lantern Horde settlement location. Search the large settlement location cards for the Lantern Horde. Place it face up in your play area. Already taken care of. The Lantern Horde is the source of all innovations and further locations the settlement will develop. The nominated survivor sits in front of the Lantern Horde in awe and gains +1 understanding. They must skip the next hunt phase as they ponder the meaning of existence. Check off the skip hunt box on the survivor record sheet. They cannot be selected as a departing survivor at this phase. So there you go. And then you return to the first story to complete the settlement phase. So we do have those things all set up. That was also the last event on our timeline. So we have the innovation language, and then we have... So originally I had the deck set up like this, and I would just roll. I actually have a deck set up in Roll20 right now. So right here, it's already pre-set up. If we search through it, it'll have all the cards in them. As you can look at the top, where it has paint and it has art and then language consequence, that's what it means. Like I mentioned, it's our cultural and tech tree, essentially. And every time we learn something, it's possible that some of them will have a consequence attached to it. And what that will do is it'll add those cards to the deck. So, for example, if we got ammonia, we would add the ammonia cards to the innovation deck, and we could potentially start learning those. Much like how primitive we were, where we didn't even have language to start with, they are very primitive in their way of, learning tech, essentially. They essentially just mash things together and hope they learn something, and that's it. And thus, our growth is somewhat random. We'll go a little bit more about innovations in just a moment. We do have one piece of tech right now. We do have what's known as language. So language. Starting innovation, survival limit +1. So originally our survival limit was 1 at the start of the that first fight we did, which means if we somehow did get more survival, but we only had, we would not be able to go above 1. Now our max is 2. Also, all survivors gain the encouraged survival action. So now, once per round, if standing, spend 1 survival to call out to a non-deaf survivor. They stand if knocked down. So this is a way to get survivors back on their feet instead of just laying on the ground for a turn. And then, of course, add language consequences, which you already have. So I already have it set up that we get survival limit increased. And then I'll go ahead and fill out the cards that we do have with encourage, and encourage. All right. Next, update death count. At this point, our death count is now 1. And it's at this point that we trigger, so there's a few events that happen based off accomplishing certain things. One of them is on first death. So, this will trigger the story event known as principal death. So we'll go ahead and go straight into that. I do know that some things have been changed on principal death, so but I'm going to go ahead and show it first, and then I'll be sure to check to make sure nothing else has changed. Principal. I'm turning to the page on the book right now, just in case. There we go. Principal death. All right, and then hope you don't mind gruesome images. So, principal death. Yeah. So that's one of the options that you can do. The other one is less gruesome. Alright. So, the group must decide what to do with their first survivor corpse. Choose one. You can either do the first harvest, which is essentially what that image was. The settlement decides to harvest the body for resources. The settlement gains the death principle, cannibalize, find and place the card on the settlement board, and note it on the settlement record sheet. And then you do an event. The other option is we bury them. The first grave, the settlement decides to build a small monument to mark their loss. The settlement gains the death principle graves, find and place that card on the settlement board, and note it on the settlement record sheet. Then you roll 1d10. So, this choice used to be very, very one-sided because it was just bad. The first, oh no, not this one. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up with a different one. This one's not one-sided. Both of them kind of produce some unique levels of play. So, there's graves, and then there's cannibalize. So, graves is all new survivors gain +1 understanding. And then when a survivor dies during the hunt or showdown phase, gain +2 endeavors. When a survivor dies during the settlement phase, gain 1 endeavor. And then cannibalize death principle increases your survival limit by 1, so you would be up to 3 now. And then whenever a survivor dies, draw 1 basic resource and add it to the settlement storage. Do not gain a resource if a survivor is lost, ceases to exist, or is exiled. So, I get, I think I usually pick cannibalize. But I think I'm going to go graves. So yeah, like I mentioned, this one, I got mixed up with a different event, but this one is not, both of them are pretty viable. And one thing I usually do, let me check something real quick. Okay, so I checked the FAQ, and you will not get the benefit on this first death, because technically we've already logged the death, which is a little annoying. I usually play so where you do it, but I think what we get instead is the one-time event instead. So I was just confirming that. So despite the fact we did lose somebody, we're not going to get the +2 endeavors this round. So what we do get instead, we're going to go ahead and grab graves first, which I have all these images to go through and pick. That's the right size. Yep, it is. All right, so we got graves. All new survivors will get +1 understanding, which is a bit unfortunate. I kind of wish they would include current ones. But we do get to do the rest of the event. So let's do that real quick. I get to, after adding the card, roll 1d10. So I'll roll 1d10. Again, my mouse is on the fritz as always. Roll 1d10. 4. I usually get the low one. Settlement gathers around the grave, each taking a moment to reflect the loss and their place in the darkness. All departing survivors will gain +1 survival and +1 understanding. So the good news is that someone's going to get understanding. Also, one thing we didn't pick is we need to pick a survivor to actually sit in front of the lantern and do the first words of language, which I haven't done yet. So first things first, we need some new character names. The person I'm going to put in front of the lantern horde. Come on, there we go. We're gonna use Medicine's dead. I don't think I have a spot for dead people. Come on. There you go. Death. Dead. Dead. There we go. Dead. Updated. Alright. So we got some new characters. I'm going to go ahead and name a few of them. I think we got 4. Yeah, we got 4 new female survivors, which conveniently is going to be the rest of the Phantasmagoria Flower View. So, edit. Lily Black. Eki, like so. Alright, Shikieki. Alright, and I'm going to have Yuuka get the +1 courage, +1 understanding, and miss next hunt. We don't need to really make a sheet for her yet. So save. Can't send her off to do anything yet. Alright, so with all that taken care of, next we check milestones, which is what we just did. That was the only principle. And next we actually do the phase. We actually go through develop. So what we have is a lantern horde right now to start with. Settlement locations. Lantern horde. So, lantern horde. You can do... There's 5 things you can do. One of them requires technology to unlock. There's innovation. We can innovate. It takes an endeavor, a bone, an organ, and a hide. So, it takes quite a bit. I've had situations where on the first lantern year, I was missing one of the 3 resources and I couldn't do it. And the way innovation works is you draw 2 cards and you pick one. And that's it. And then the other things you can do with Lantern Horde is you can spend an endeavor, which is what these little stars mean, to build a new location, settlement thing. So you can build the Bonesmith, the Skinworker, and the Organ Grinder. We only have 3 endeavors right now. And you can only innovate once per settlement phase. So it's generally a good idea if you're able to do it to always innovate. So we're going to start with that first. We're going to go ahead and innovate. So I used to roll for these, but now I have a deck of cards to do it with. So, well, first I have to spend the resources. So 1 monster hide. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that monster hide, that organ, and we'll get rid of this bone. Alright, so delete, delete, delete. And then... Alright. 1, 2. We got paint, which will give us access to dashing, which essentially allows us to spend a survival point to immediately move away to get a free movement, essentially, which can be really useful for avoiding effects sometimes. And then ammonia, which will give us +1 survival to departing survivors, which is pretty useful because not having departing survival means you have to rely on other ways to get survival. Now, I do know there's ways to get ammonia through hunt events, especially with the cat, but it requires reasonably high understanding, and also ammonia can really help with dealing with things like sickness and stuff. But yeah, this is a science, and as you can see under the keywords, it has science, and this one's art. So do we want to focus on art or science? To be honest, I'm pretty sure Yuuka would the flower field would probably prefer art. I usually always grab ammonia as the first one because it is really, really good. It gets you access to one of the. It'll get you access to the leather worker, which is pretty important. Yeah, you need ammonia to make leather, and leather is pretty important. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and just pick. I also don't have that many. I also don't have a lot of survival actions. Also, one thing you can look at is see what the consequences are. Ammonia would get us access to bloodletting and lantern oven. Lantern oven is amazing, by the way. It's essentially gets you eventually access to smelting. And then paint would get us access to face painting, pictograph, and sculpture. Which some of these used to be really, really useless, but they've been improved. Nothing happens. I might go for I think I'll go for paint and see how that goes. Though to be honest, I think you definitely need to get leather pretty quickly because that's really the only way to get shields, and you need shields in this game. So I think I will go ahead and yeah, I might want to take ammonia. It's just smarter, and Yuuka's smart. So this will go back in. We'll end up getting ammonia. We'll have to get the consequences for that, which is of course going to be bloodletting, which is pretty Yuuka. There's bloodletting. And then the other one is lantern oven. So we'll get those two. And then they get added to the deck. So now there's 7 cards, so it gets a bit harder to get the ones you want as the deck gets larger. So we'll go ahead and add not ammonia. Yeah, it was ammonia. And that'll give us 1 departing survival, which I really need the survival too. It's just dashing's really good, by the way, but if you don't have survival, it literally is not going to do anything for us. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and do oven. There we go. So we'll at least have a visual for what we're getting. All right. So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and that was our first endeavor. Got us ammonia, which is useful, but we don't really have anything else to do with it yet. So next, we're going to go ahead and spend an endeavor to build the bonesmith. 1 down. Okay. All right. So we'll get the bonesmith. Don't need the innovations anymore. Settlement locations. Bonesmith. So bonesmith is pretty much where we're going to get most of our weapons. You can also endeavor here to craft a weapon crafter, which we can actually do immediately. We actually have enough resources, but it would pretty much kill all of our resources to do it. And if you haven't played if you played the original and not 1.5, some new additions is the bone club, which costs 3 bone, and it's a very slow weapon, but it's really, really strong. It has higher strength than even the bone axe. But yeah, we're going to need to craft weapons because the next white lion we're going to fight is going to have toughness 8, and we'll need an answer for that. All right, so bonesmith, and then we have 1 endeavor left. At this point, there's not really much we can do. Like I said, we either need to build a new location or try to build the weapon crafter. So I'm going to go ahead and build. I'm going to go ahead and build the skinnery. That'll get us our access to the various rawhide armors. So, skinnery. One more. There we go. Alright, so skinnery. So the skinnery gets you access to armor. There are armor sets. If you wear a full armor set, you can get some special benefits. I can't remember exactly what the rawhide does. I think it's anytime you do a survival action, there's a chance you can get the point refunded. It also gives you additional armor if you have a full set. You can also get access to bandages, which is one of the few ways to get rid of bleed tokens during combat. And then there's the Rawhide Whip, which requires ammonia, which we do have access. And then there's the Rawhide Drum, which requires drums, which we don't have. We can also spend an endeavor and resources to get the Leather Worker, though right now we can't afford that right now. So, we got some options. Not many, but we have some options. We're down to 1 organ. The scrap we can't do anything with. We have 3 bone, and this shimmering mane, which counts as 2 hide. So 1 organ, 2 hide, 3 bone. Generally, one of the first things we want to do is get weapons. So let's go ahead and go over some of the weapons that are available to us. I have my gear sorted by the locations you get them from. So there's the bone axe. This is generally the go-to weapon for a starter weapon. It's a weapon, melee, axe, and a bone. It's 2 speed, 6 accuracy, 3 strength. It's frail, which means if it ever hits a super hard location, it will break. Thankfully, there are no super hard locations on the White Lion, but for the future, that's something to be aware of. And it has the ability called Savage. Once per attack, if you critically wound, cause 1 additional wound, this effect does not apply to impervious hit locations. So anytime that you crit with this, you instead of just removing 1 AI card, you would remove 2. Very useful, because you need to do damage as quickly as possible against these monsters, because, else your head will explode. You might also notice there's a little red tab to the left. You might also have noticed that there's those color tabs on the little tokens, the images on the locations as well. That's where the position on the grid comes into play. But right now we just have that red tab. We won't worry about it. We have access to the bone blade, which costs... So the bone axe costs a bone and an organ, so it would use up our last organ. The bone blade is frail, and it's a weapon, melee, sword, and bone. 2 speed, 6 accuracy, 2 strength. So not as strong as the bone axe, has no special abilities, is also frail, and it has a red tab to the left, and that's about it. But it only costs a bone, doesn't cost anything else. There's the bone dagger. Sorry if the images are a little crooked. Some of these I did myself, scanning them in. I do own the physical board game, the base game, and the 1.5. I don't own any of the expansions, though. Bone dagger, weapon, melee, dagger, and bone. 3 speed, which means you make 3 attacks instead of just 2. 7 accuracy and 1 strength, so it's a slightly faster founding stone, really. It's also not frail, so it can't break easily. And on a perfect hit, gain 1 survival. Perfect hits is where you roll a natural 10 on an attack roll. So every perfect hit you get on this, you can potentially get, anywhere from 0 to 3 survival with a single attack action. Bad news is it's only 1 strength. Also, all the weapon types, you can eventually start developing proficiencies and masteries towards certain weapons, and that will also give you various benefits. Dagger only costs 1 bone. The bone darts. Bone darts are weapon, range, thrown, and bone. They have 1 speed, 7 accuracy, but 3 strength. It's also range 6. This is our ranged weapon available to us. It is frail, so if you do throw it and it hits a super hard location, it will break. It's definitely a good idea to get at least 1 bone dart, because not having a melee weapon against the White Lion can cause you some great pain. Also, it's 1 attack, which is both good and bad. It means you're not going to risk yourself hitting traps very often, and you don't have to worry about you just don't run into traps as often. Now, the thing about bone darts is it doesn't have a weapon type, which means you can't really get proficient in it. So it is what it is. But it's usually good to have have laying around if you ever need it. It has a red tab on the left. The bone dagger actually has a tab on the top and the left, if I forgot to mention that. We won't go with the pickaxe or the sickle because we can't get those. The skull helmet is actually armor. It's a helmet. It's fragile. When you suffer a severe head injury, you can the skull helm is destroyed and you archive the card. So essentially, if you take too much damage to the head, it will break the helmet. But it provides 3 armor to the head, which is probably the most you're going to get for a little while. And the head's the most vulnerable, so it's pretty useful. It requires 2 bone to craft or a skull. which skull is a specific resource that also counts as a bone. We're probably not going to craft one of these. I usually try to craft one if I have a skull, but I don't, so it is what it is. And it has a red tab for the bottom. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close the skull helm because I'm not going to get one. And then there's the bone club, which is the new weapon. Bone club, heavy, melee, two-handed, heavy, club, and bone. So two-handed generally means you just can't dual wield with it. It's speed 2, accuracy 6, strength 5. It has a red tab on the left and right. And it's cumbersome. Now, cumbersome means is whenever you attack with it, you have to use up your movement as well. Which means you can't move and attack for this thing. So it's kind of hard to use. It's quite frankly cumbersome. There are ways to get around this using special abilities like Pounce and Charge, but we don't have those yet. So, something to be aware of. Alright. Club would be nice. It's also nice because it gets you a club early on. It was kind of weird in the original game that you couldn't get a club until... Essentially, you could not get a club until the next monster we fight. The next huntable monster we will encounter. Which is really, really strange. So, and it's like, Bone Club is pretty self-explanatory. So they added in the Bone Club. It's pretty nice. It's also not fragile. It's pretty awesome. I will say for building up the club proficiency, it's not that great because I know what the first specialization is for club, which involves dual wielding. But as far as like a big heavy hitting weapon, can't go wrong with it. Essentially with 5 strength, that means you will wound on 3s on a regular white lion, which is really, really good. Granted, you have to hit and actually be near it, but it is what it is. Tap on the left, tap on the right. I'm not going to craft one because it's going to use up all of our bone. And then for the skinnery, we have the following. We have the bandages, which has a blue tab to the left, a green tab on the bottom. It's an item, which means you can't have multiples of. And you can spend an action to remove 2 bleed tokens from yourself or an adjacent survivor. So essentially you can bandage someone up. These can be pretty useful. Also, it's kind of useful just to get those colored tabs. But it's probably not something we're going to grab right now because we don't really have that much hide. And then there are all the raw hides, which I'm just going to bring up all of them. Alright, so there's the vest, which is 1 armor to the chest, has a blue tab and a red tab. And this one actually has an ability. If you connect a blue tab above this and a red tab to the right of it, you'll get +1 evasion. What evasion does is it reduces the monster's chance to hit. So all those +2 pluses that the cat would have, +1 evasion would make it 3+. Which doesn't sound like much, but that's 10%. Every point of evasion means there's an additional 10% chance that the monster will miss you. So you'll be going from a 10% miss chance to a 20%. The rawhide pants is just 1 armor to the waist. It's kind of not that great because it's the same as cloth. The only reason you would get it is to complete a set. The rawhide headband, which is 1 armor to the head. This is actually pretty awesome because if you connect the blue tab, which conveniently connects with the rawhide vest, you get an additional ability, which is you can spend an action to look at the top 2 AI cards and place them back on top of the deck in any order. So this is going to let you take a look at what is coming up next and push down cards that are otherwise really, really nasty to deal with. Rawhide gloves is just 1 armor to the arms. It has a tab to the left. So essentially if you had the headband, the gloves, and the vest together, you would essentially complete that combination. When you depart, you gain 1 survival. So this is one of the ways you can get survival through just items. And then there's the boots, which is the same thing. It's armor to the legs instead, and gives you +1 survival if you depart with it. So it's pretty awesome because if you have a full rawhide set, that means +2 survival for that survivor every time he departs. And in the case of what we have right now, it would max out their survival. I'm not interested in the boots or the gloves. I am a little bit interested in the vest and the headband. And then we have access, since we have ammonia, we have access to the rawhide whip. It's a weapon, melee, whip, and rawhide. And it gives you 3 attacks at 7 accuracy and 1 strength. So it's essentially like a dagger. And it has the ability called Provoke. Whenever you wound with this weapon, you gain the priority target token. Whenever you have priority target, the monster, instead of doing the usual check for target thing, it'll just immediately go straight for you, no matter what. So it's a bit dangerous, but it is a whip, and there is whip proficiency, so that is a thing. Also, certain types, keywords can apply to certain events that you run into while hunting. So there's definitely uses for having a whip, but I don't think I'm going to spend the resources for it. For the whip, it would cost us, I believe, a bone and a hide. Yeah, it would cost us a bone and a hide, which is not something I'm willing to give up right now. So let's get rid of the rawhide whip. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the headband and the vest. So let's go ahead and take care of that now. All right, takes care of those. We'll go ahead and go here. Like I mentioned before, we're going to use the shimmering mane to get the +2 basic hide resources and use them immediately. So that takes care of that. So that leaves us the scrap, which we can't use, 3 bone, and an organ. Usually we would use organs on the organ grinder location, but we don't have the endeavor to actually get it. So we're going to go ahead and use the organ and one of these bones to make a bone axe. Axe is a really good proficiency that we'll start working towards. It's also 3 strength, and it's just really kind of useful. So we'll get one of those. Alright. Also, with the bone axe, we can attach it to the rawhide vest and get that +1 evasion, which is always good. I'm not a big fan of the bone dagger, to be honest, and there are other ways we can get swords. So that leaves us with 2 bone left. We could hold on to resources if we want to, but I think I kind of want a little bit of everything. So we're going to get bone darts, and we'll get 2 of them. It's generally a good idea to have at least few on hand. Or do I want to have 2 on hand, or do I want to craft a different weapon? I think I'm gonna go with 2. It's generally safer. Also, it has a red tab to the left, so if we ever need to combine it with something, we can. All right, so that's all our resources except for the scrap. And we'll keep track of that resource now. Broken. Boop. And over here. Alright, so mainly the key thing is to make sure at least as many people have weapons as possible. One person is going to obviously be our powerhouse. It's probably going to be Kamachi, because she has +1 strength. Also, I made these boxes a little too big. One lower. Okay. Then give her the axe. So with her +1 strength and the bone axe, she'll have 4 strength, which means she'll wound on 4s and up. So she'll have a 60% wound chance. Everyone else is going to have not as high. So it'll be something like that. Alright. And then, yep. I believe that takes care of that. Let me check the settlement phase. So we used all of our endeavors. We used one for innovation, and we used the other 2 for making locations, and then we crafted a bunch of stuff. We have ammonia now, which means our departing survival is 1. And whoever we send is going to get fancy stuff. So I'm not going to send Runazuki. Actually, I will send Runazuki. No, I don't want to send Runazuki. So we're not sending Runazuki, we're not sending Unzon. Actually, we'll send Unzon. Yeah, we'll send Unzon. We're not taking Runazuki with us. And we can't take Yuuka because she's currently missing the next hunt. So as far as who we're going to take with us, we do have 2 unnamed male characters, but I think we're going to end up taking Lily Black and Aya for our first, along with Kamachi. And if we survive, if Unzon and Kamachi survive, they'll get their first level up. So that's the plan. I need to get some pictures for those characters. I'll deal with that in a bit. But just to make sure, let's take a look at the settlement phase. Develop, prepare departing survivors. This is the part where we actually start setting up the gear grids. I kind of have them already set up how I want them to be. Komachi will essentially have something like this now. She'll have +1, +1, that. And then when she departs, she's going to get a survival. She'll get a survival and... Well, she's going to get survival from the ammonia, and she's going to get a survival from the first grave event that we did. Our max survival limit is unfortunately 2, so one of those points is going to be wasted anyway. Alright. As for how I keep track of these sheets when I'm not using them, I can do something like there's this get URL button, which will get me this. Sometimes it's a bit buggy, so you might want to check to make sure it works the way it's supposed to. Otherwise, you have to just copy this entire bar, which is going to be super long, and it kind of bugs out as far as a link is concerned. But if you copy and paste it, it'll work. So what we can do here is we can go edit, do that, and then save changes, and then I can copy and then go to that URL, and it'll have all my updates on it. So it's pretty useful. Alright, is there anything I actually need to note on this? No. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And after you depart, well, once you prepare the departing survivors, step 9 would be special showdown, which we don't need to worry about. And then we record and archive resources. So the way that works, which I actually screwed up on, so let me fix that right now. So I screwed up. I shouldn't have been deleting those cards, but that's okay. I have a way of fixing that. I'll just do that off screen. I'll have to remake the innovation deck again. All right. So what you essentially do is you put the cards back and the resources back into the respective decks, and write them down on your sheet. What I do is I just put them as images on this section here. And then after that, so you end the phase, you lose any unspent endeavors, you store everything, store the unused gear, and then clean up, which we don't need to worry about in this case. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and call this a video. This will finish up the settlement phase. I'll fix up everything else and get started on our very first hunt. So, I am the Depressed Eater. This was Kingdom Death Monster with the Sunflower Field. See you guys next time.